And how fortunate we are to be able to experience this outrageous love of Jesus, a love that doesn't disappoint, a love that can't be explained, a love that we don't deserve, and yet it's a love that's poured out on us again and again. And it's a love that continues to hold on to us even in the midst of all the chaos going on around us. And so LCBC, let me invite you to join me, and let's just pause and let's thank God for His incredible love for each and every one of us. Heavenly Father, today we come to you and we just want to say thank you. Thank you for this incredible love that's real, it's authentic, it chases us down, and Father, it's just poured out on us again and again and again, not because we deserve it, but just because you love us. And through Jesus, you make it possible for us to be called your sons, to be called your daughters, to be a part of your family. And God, how cool is that? So we just say thank you for this love. God, I ask in the midst of the turmoil that we're experiencing around us, that you would just continue to watch over and protect us. Father, for those that are in the medical fields and just kind of on the front lines of working to just eradicate this virus, Father, I pray for protection, for good health, for safety. Father, for those that are experiencing a loss of a job right now, a loss of a paycheck and income to be able to just provide for family, for housing, for food, Father, I pray that you'd provide, that you'd do things just in miraculous ways, unexpected ways. And in the midst of all of this, Father, that we can experience your love in ways that we've never experienced it before. For families that are at home and moms and dads trying to teach their kids school and subjects that maybe we've struggled with ourselves, but Father, now we're expected to teach it our kids. And so, Father, I pray that you just give wisdom, that you'd give patience, you'd give understanding. And Father, that today, each of us would truly experience your love in a brand new way. Thank you, God, for loving us. Thank you for pouring that out on us again and again. And I pray in Jesus' name, amen. Well, as we continue in our series we've entitled Jesus Lies, today I actually want to address one of the most common lies that I hear about Jesus, and it's a lie that I hear repeated again and again and again. Most often, I hear it repeated by well-meaning followers of Jesus. And it's a lie that actually says that if you'll turn your life over to Jesus, then the rest of your life is going to go magically smooth. It'll just go smoothly. And it's the lie that says turning your life over to Jesus will ensure that you're going to live a troubled-free life. And you and I both know that that's not the truth. But that lie continues to be repeated again and again. And here's the truth. Jesus never promised a troubled-free life. And in fact, Jesus actually said, here on earth, you will have many trials and many sorrows. And that's what we know is true. We know Jesus' words are true. We experience lots of trials and we experience lots of sorrows in our lives. And right now, you and I are living in the middle of some of those sorrows and some of those trials that Jesus was talking about 2,000 years ago. And it's actually hard to believe that it was just about 10 weeks ago when the leadership of LCBC, we met together and we asked ourselves a crazy and maybe what seemed like then a far-fetched question. And we said, what happens if we get shut down because of the coronavirus? And what if that shutdown actually lasts until July the 1st? And never thinking it would really happen, but just trying to be ready, just trying to plan for the worst case scenario. And then it happened. And so 10 weeks ago, we adopted a very simple plan for each and every one of us. And this plan was that each and every one of us would focus on 3 relationships. That we would focus on our relationship with God, that we would focus on our relationships with each other, and then that we would focus on relationships with others in our communities. And can I just say, you guys have responded so well. And just want to say to all of LCBC, way to go. I am so proud of you for the way that you're doing in just a strange and very difficult time. But now it's actually time to kind of figure out, okay, what happens next? What is coming next? When all this first started, we thought COVID-19 was just going to be this interruption in our lives, and an interruption that would cause us to have to stay home maybe for a few days, possibly even a few weeks, and then everything will be back to normal. But COVID-19 has not just been an interruption. We might even call it a disruption. And see, an interruption is more of a temporary pause. It's like an annoyance or a bother, but a disruption actually brings change. It brings change to the way we live, to the way that we operate, the way we see life. This has truly been a disruption. Now, throughout history, God has used disruptions to accomplish His purposes in the world. And I want to give you an example of how God has taken a disruption and He's used it to accomplish His purposes. And so after Jesus' death and His resurrection, He actually instructed His followers. He said, look, this is what I want you to do. I want you to be my witnesses, telling people about me everywhere in Jerusalem, throughout Judea and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. In other words, get Jesus to the people is kind of what Jesus was saying. Make sure that people everywhere know about Jesus. Now, I'm sure that the followers of Jesus intended to do that. I would even imagine that they strategized and they met and they talked about how are we going to tell everybody everywhere about Jesus. And I guess they talked and they talked and they strategized and they strategized and they talked some more. But here's the thing. They never left Jerusalem. They never did what Jesus actually asked them to do. That is, then along comes this major disruption. And we read about that disruption that these followers of Jesus first experienced in Acts chapter 8, verse 1, when it says, "A great wave of persecution began that day, sweeping over the church in Jerusalem, and all the believers except the apostles were scattered through the regions of Judea and Samaria." Now, one of the things that's important to note about disruptions is they're never comfortable. They're never easy. They always seem to be a mistake. And in a disruption, it feels like everything is out of control. But we need to understand these disruptions are never out of God's control. And we need to remember that God is in the business of making something good out of a bad situation. In this particular disruption, the followers of Jesus were dragged out of their homes. They were thrown into prison. Others were actually murdered. So much for living a troubled-free life. See, Jesus never promised a troubled-free life. But this disruption actually caused the followers of Jesus to do the very thing that Jesus had asked them to do in the first place. And so we read further in Acts chapter 8, it says, but in spite of the persecution, but the believers who were scattered preached the good news about Jesus everywhere they went. But it took a disruption to get them out of their comfort zone. And it was an awful disruption. The followers of Jesus, they were put in prison, they were murdered. It was an awful time for it to be a follower of Jesus. And you and I are in the middle of a major disruption. Anything that goes on for 10 weeks and counting is a major disruption. But we need to be real clear about this. In no way is what we're experiencing today comparable to what the early church experienced. No, we can't gather and worship the way we did 10 weeks ago, and we can't greet each other and see each other like we did before, but we can still worship and we can still talk about Jesus. So make no mistake, what we're experiencing today is nothing like what the early church experienced, but this is still a disruption. And we are experiencing trials and sorrows. And while I don't claim to know all that God is doing in this particular disruption, I do know that God is using this disruption to change, to bring about change to our church, to bring about change to all churches, His church. And I know that not everybody likes the thought that God is somehow in this disruption, but you need to understand He is. God is very much at work right now. And in this particular disruption, I would tell you that we as a church, LCBC, has changed. And you might wonder, how has LCBC changed? What's been the biggest change for LCBC during COVID-19? And well, I would say what's happened is that we've gone from a church with 15 locations that happens to be online to now being a church that believes that what happens online is every bit as important as what happens at our 15 locations. In other words, we're not the same animal anymore. Before, we would simply broadcast online whatever we were doing to engage people in our buildings. Or another way to look at it or to say it is that before, by watching online, you got to look and see what was going on inside of our buildings. But now, while we continue to engage people inside our buildings, we don't stop doing that. In the future, we hope to be back in our buildings. But now, we're also working hard to speak directly to those who are engaging with us online. No longer are our online participants simply observing what was going on in our buildings. Now we're trying hard to speak directly to people online, and now we're trying hard to figure out how do we help someone become a fully devoted follower of Jesus online, even if that person never enters one of our buildings. And so we're thinking about it kind of this way. We're asking the question, what if people become part of LCBC, but they never visit one of our physical locations? Or we're kind of asking it this way. We're saying, how can we help people become fully devoted followers of Jesus simply by participating with us online? Now, I've told you before about a visit several of us on our leadership team here at LCBC had a few years ago. We headed down to ChickfilA to their headquarters in Atlanta, and while we were visiting with the leadership of ChickfilA for several days, we came away impressed with Chick-fil-A's goal as an organization. And we were actually surprised by their goal. You see, they said their goal is to get chicken to the people. They said they're in the chicken business, and what surprised us is we thought they were trying to get people into their stores, and they love their stores, but they said, no, our goal is not simply to get people into our stores. And you need to understand, their stores are doing great. I mean, just try to get food from ChickfilA right now, and especially if you go Lancaster, Belmont, and man, I think I told you, Ruth and I waited 35 minutes to get just up to order our food the last time we were at ChickfilA. And so we came away from our experience in Atlanta, and we said, you know what, okay, if their goal is to get chicken to the people, then really our goal is very similar. But for us, it's not about chicken. For us, it's about Jesus. And we said, really, our goal is to get Jesus to the people. Our goal isn't, just like Chick-fil-A, it's not to get people to come into our buildings, though we love our buildings. And it's really about getting Jesus to the people. And so you need to understand today that because of this disruption through COVID-19, LCBC has changed, and we're thinking differently than we thought before. And it's actually taken us back to our roots. It's reminded us that LCBC is all about getting Jesus to the people. And online is not just a tool to broadcast what we're doing in our buildings. Instead, online now is a way to get Jesus to the people. It's a way for people to fully engage in Jesus and in LCBC. And in essence, this COVID-19 disruption has changed the way we operate around LCBC. But changing the way we operate, really, it's nothing new for LCBC. Changing our methods of getting Jesus to the people, that's in our DNA. And the last big change in our methods of getting Jesus to the people came in 2005. And in 2005, LCBC met in one location. We met in one location out in the cornfields of Mannheim. And as LCBC grew from 7 and then to 8,000 people every weekend in our one location, we ran into a disruption. That disruption was the fact that our local government told us there's no more room for us to expand in Mannheim. And as with any disruption, at first we were upset, we were outraged, we were shocked. We thought, who are they to tell us we can't grow anymore? Who do they think they are? But looking back now on that disruption, it was that disruption that led us to an incredible journey, a journey of doing church not just in one location, but in multiple locations. And now, 15 years later, we've been able to expand way beyond what one location could ever have accommodated. Now, we're 17,000 people meeting every weekend across 15 locations. And see, in the middle of disruptions, we've always got to remember, God is in the business of making something good out of a bad situation. Now, here's the cool thing. Because of the disruption of COVID-19 and because we've been forced to work only online for the past 10 weeks, no longer are we really even a church of 17,000 people. Now we think we're a church of closer to 20,000 people connecting each weekend, 20,000 lives that are being changed by Christ. And in the middle of this disruption, again, we've got to remember, God is still in the business of making something good out of a bad situation. And here's what you need to know. Our goals haven't changed. Our goal is still to introduce more people to Jesus and fully follow Him. Our goal is still to get Jesus to the people. Now, I know what a lot of you are thinking, maybe most of you are thinking, David, that's great. All I want to know, though, is when will we regather in our buildings? When do we get to go back into our buildings? And so to answer that question, I need to tell you about some of our leadership principles that guide our decisions here at LCBC. And it's been amazing over this past several weeks just how these leadership principles play out again and again, and they're helping us navigate these turbulent and rapidly changing times. And so the first thing for us is always stay focused on our mission. And our mission is to introduce others to Jesus and together fully follow Him. And what that means is the methods may change, but the mission never does. It's always about getting Jesus to the people. Our first leadership principle is this. It's simply to pray about everything, to talk to God, listen to God every step that we take. So we've been doing a lot of talking and listening to God. A second principle that drives the decisions that we make is to be sure that we've remained focused on what is best and not get sidetracked by what is good. And what that means is that getting Jesus to the people is always what's best for us. And what that means is there might be some things that are really good things that we will choose not to participate in as a church because we just want to stay focused on what is best, not get sidetracked by what is good. Let me give you some examples. For instance, our mission is not to fight the government. Our mission is not to fight the government and make sure that all Americans can experience riches. Our mission is not to make sure that all Americans can maintain their current level of affluence and their current lifestyle. Our mission isn't even to reopen our buildings as quickly as possible. Our mission is to get Jesus to the people. That's what's best for us. A third guiding principle as we make decisions is to communicate truth with grace, which simply means that when we disagree with each other or when other people disagree with us, let's just be nice to each other while we disagree. And for years we've said around LCBC, we want to be known more for what we're for than for what we're against. And so can I just give you a word of caution? My caution is this: please be careful how you talk and represent yourself on social media or to the people that you disagree with. Just play nice, because you're not just typing clever words or angry words on your computer or on your phone. You're actually representing Jesus. So play nice. Communicate truth with grace. Another guiding principle for us is that we know that we can't please everyone. And I watch a lot of organizations who try to please everyone, and what happens is they end up pleasing no one, which is why we kind of live by what we call the 90-10 rule. And the 90-10 rule simply says that we would rather have 90% of you wildly enthusiastic about what we're doing and know that 10% of you might be upset with what we're doing. We'd rather do that than just fail at trying to please everyone. And so I'll just tell you, I'm already seeing an uptick in emails that are telling me all the different ways that LCBC ought to be moving forward. And I appreciate hearing your thoughts, but just understand, we can't please everyone, and we're okay with that. And remember, as you send me your ideas, just play nice. Play nice. Now, a quick side note. We need to keep in mind that when we hear about businesses reopening, we need to remember that in reality, LCBC never closed. And we've been doing business all along. And we're doing it differently, for sure, than we did 10 weeks ago. And we may wish that we could go back to the way we did it 10 weeks ago, but LCBC never really closed. And so when you read about businesses reopening, or maybe let's even use sporting franchises as an example, they truly were closed. And now as they talk about reopening, they're talking about, in essence, doing what we've been doing all along. They're talking about how can we play our games again, but let's play it without a live audience in the room, or let's play it to an empty stadium or to an arena so that they can broadcast it out. And if you think about it, that's what we've been doing all along. We've been doing our gatherings without a live audience in the room, and sports teams now are just kind of catching up to us, and so we never really did close. One more guiding principle that I'll give you, and then I'll tell you what we're going to do. The principle is this: our God will never fail, which again means that God is in the business of making something good out of a bad situation. And so whatever we're experiencing right now, can I just tell you, don't be discouraged and don't ever give up, whatever your situation is. Our God will never fail. So here's what we're planning. We will, at some point, regather in our buildings. We're going to do that. We know that. We will regather when guidelines allow us to regather. So we know we're going to regather in our buildings. We will do it when guidelines allow us, and when our physical gatherings actually offer a unique value over online gatherings. When there's something unique about coming back into our buildings, then we'll regather together in our physical buildings. And so to be honest, what we're asking really are the questions are these. A time is going to come when we could regather, but what we're asking is, should we regather right away? And what we're also asking is, when will people be comfortable coming back, returning to our buildings? And so we've said we'll regather in our buildings. We'll do it when we can experience unique values in our physical gatherings that right now we can't experience online. And so let me give you some examples of how we'll decide if it's time to move back in to our buildings. For instance, when we can experience live corporate worship together. And I know there's something about singing in a room full of people and hearing the bands live and other voices around you so your voice can't be heard, and maybe you miss that when you're trying to watch it online. I understand that. When we can come back into our buildings and experience corporate worship together, we'll consider coming back into our buildings. When KidMin, we've got activities for our kids when it's up and running and fully operational. When we can come into our buildings and experience relationships to their max, which means social distancing is self-governed, which means the use of masks is really a personal choice. I mean, what I've kind of said to the staff is I don't I don't want to wake up one morning and look on my phone and see a YouTube video of one of our security guys, and we've got security guys across all of our locations that are there, men and women, people doing security for us. I don't want to wake up on YouTube and see one of our security guys or women body slamming one of you to the floor because you didn't wear your mask properly. And so when we can come in, and that's flexible, it's a personal choice. Or we've also said, when reasonable limits on auditorium capacity have been set, meaning there's enough of us that can come into the auditorium that would really make it a unique value for us. And we've also said when the general public is coming back into large groups, and then when we're comfortable inviting other people. Now, I know that's a lot to kind of fathom, but those are kind of the filters that we're looking through when we decide it's time to come back. And let me just show you a photo of a church, and I'll tell you, it's in Dallas. It's a church that's the size of LCBC, and this is a church that said, you know what, let's go ahead and start meeting now. And I look at that photo, and I go, I don't think there's going to be more value, unique value in coming back and experiencing this than what I could experience online. I don't know that I'm going to feel the experience of worshiping together. I don't know that the relational elements are going to be there. I don't know that the idea of having to sit there with masks, social distance, with kids, it just doesn't look to me like a better experience. We actually came across a recent survey that was asking people when would they be comfortable returning to different events. And specifically, one of the questions where they were asked was, when would you be comfortable coming back to sporting events or to concerts? In other words, into big crowds. And you know what the number was? 80% of the people surveyed said they're not yet comfortable coming back into big crowds. So, all of that said, let me just share with you our phased approach of when we could regather, or maybe even better, when we should regather as a church. And so currently we're in kind of the red phase, and the red phase says no more than 10 people getting together at one time. And so what we're doing in the red phase is saying, man, online, what we're doing now, let's do everything we can to offer everything we have online. The next phase, our first phase, will be the yellow phase. And again, we'll continue to do everything that we're doing online. But in the yellow phase, once we're allowed to have more than 10 people gather together, our encouragement is going to be to gather together in homes. And maybe that means inviting more family in with you. Maybe that means your small group. Maybe that means your neighbors. But home gatherings. And what I like about this is it's kind of going back to our roots as a church and LCBC's beginnings and gatherings in the home of Don and Joyce Hershey. Or if you want to go further back, it's really going all the way back to our roots, the first churches ever that existed right after the death and resurrection of Jesus. And they gathered in homes. They weren't in big buildings like we do today. They were in homes, and they gathered together there. Second phase of just all of this is when we hit the green phase, and at that point we'll continue to do everything that we're doing online, and we'll also continue to say, man, gather in homes together, and then we'll begin some trials. Trials is just say, let's just try it in some of our buildings, or let's try some things out in our communities and see how it works. And then our third phase, again, the green phase, everything online, continuing to encourage home gatherings, and then when we can offer just a full menu at our physical locations, we say, okay, let's open back up completely, let's regather in our facilities, and let's come back together. Now, I know this plan won't please everyone. For some of you, it'll be too slow. For some, you'll say, oh, that's way too quick. And I know there's no time limits because, again, we'll be dictated by the guidelines that are given to us. And then for others of you, you'll say, this plan doesn't answer any questions. It doesn't tell me when anything is going to happen. And you know what? That's okay. We don't know all the answers. And I hope you do know that it's okay to say, I don't know, don't you? And here's what I do know. In the middle of disruptions, God could do more than you and I could ever dream or imagine to be possible. And here's what I do know. Our God will never fail, and God is still in the business of making something good out of a bad situation. God takes what seems bad and he turns it into good. And so 2,000 years ago, God made something good out of the persecution that the early church was experiencing. 15 years ago, God made something good when LCBC Mannheim was told it couldn't expand its buildings. And even today, I believe God is doing something good, even in the midst of these turbulent times. Now, what you need to know is this isn't just true for churches. God can make something good out of your life as well. God can take something good, can make something good out of whatever situation you find yourself in today. And you may say, David, you don't have a clue what my situation is like. There's no way God can make something good with my life. But I would tell you you're wrong. You're dead wrong. And to prove how wrong you are, I actually want you to hear a story from Fran and Neil. I want you to hear their story because I think if God can make something good out of Fran and Neil's bad situation, without a doubt, I know that he can make something good out of your bad situation as well. Listen to Fran and Neil's story.
When I met Fran, we were joining an adult baseball league. And I knew Fran probably, this is our third week together, we probably knew each other. We had double headers every weekend. And we were at this one field and we were just crushing the team.
So we went to the bar after the baseball game and we all got drunk. There was probably 10 of us to start and they all kept whittling down until it ended up being just me and Neil. And Neil was afraid to drive home. So I offered to give him a ride. And I was drunk, I shouldn't have drove. We were driving down the road. Neil kind of hung out the window and he was holding onto the roof rack at about 50-ish miles an hour. He fell out of the car. And all I heard was like a thud on the side of the car because I was looking straight and I looked over and he wasn't there. I had no idea what happened. And I pulled over to the side of the road and I walked back and I saw him laying there on the side of the road with blood all over his face. And he was breathing. And out of a whole lot of things, out of fear, out of selfishness, out of pride, I left him there. I left him by the side of the road. I was more worried about myself getting in trouble for drinking and being involved. And then I went home. The next day, I got a phone call from the state police. And they said, "Do you know a guy named Neil Miller?" I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Do you know what happened to him last night?" I'm like, "No, I left him at the bar and I went home." And they're like, "Well, we found him on the side of the road." And I told them I don't know anything about it. I was more afraid of my penalty than his well-being. The state police contacted me numerous times because they were investigating, and I just kept lying to them.
I was in the hospital for 41 days, severe brain injury. And then I had rehab for about 6 months. I was messed up. I mean, I had to grow up again. I had to learn to brush my teeth. I always thought Fran tried to kill me. Yeah, he'll get what's coming to him. That's exactly what I always thought. He'll get what he deserves.
I was selfish. I didn't really care. I didn't love. I left my wife. I left my family. I left them destitute, barely able to get by. Up until I was saved, I never really loved anything in my life. I was my God. There was no remorse on who I hurt. It didn't matter as long as I was protected. It's embarrassing. It really is.
The whole reason I found Jesus was because I was an alcoholic and all I cared about was alcohol. I would just lowly ways find a way to drink alcohol. And I had a good buddy that was always throwing Jesus at me. I remember in his kitchen him throwing him at me again, and I'm like, maybe you're right. And he was right. And I was actually born again in 2011. And there was a sermon in 2013 where it says you gotta forgive the person. And I knew where Fran worked because I delivered there, and I went into his office And first off, I thanked him for calling the ambulance to pick me up, because I thought he called the ambulance. I have no clue how an ambulance came and got me.
He did thank me for calling the ambulance, and I told him I didn't. I didn't call the ambulance. I didn't call the police. I didn't do anything except leave. And he sat in front of me and proclaimed Jesus, and I wasn't saved yet, and said, "I forgive you." And I didn't know what to say. I couldn't understand how somebody could forgive me. I wasn't saved yet. I didn't understand what love was, you know what I mean? I've never really received it. I didn't. But he sat in front of me and said he forgives me. And my selfish thought was, okay, we're good and clear on that now. Do you understand what I mean? And it's just, my selfish, nasty ideas were like, okay, I don't have to worry about that one. So I didn't get it. When I had left my wife, she went to LCBC, and every week she wrote a prayer request. Pray for my husband, pray for my husband, pray for Fran Lafferty, pray for Fran Lafferty. Jesus saved me, but through the people in that church praying for me week in, week out, while I'm out wrecking lives in sin, okay, God had enough of me hurting people. And he came down and he showed me a movie of everything I've done wrong in my life at one time. And that was crushing, completely crushing. And the next day, everything was different. Everything that I used to love, I now hated. And everything I used to hate, I now loved.
When I forgave him, that was probably 10 months before he walked in the starting point and said, "Neil, do you know who I am?" And I did, but I didn't. But that hug cured everything. It did, man. It seemed like 2 days long, but it was worth it. It was so worth it. I thought the guy killed me, and I wanted evil to happen to him, and now I love the guy.
I mean, he brings us from death to life, not life to death. Ever since I've been saved, it's the only time I've ever really feel I've lived.